They say holidays have a way of making silence louder, and let me tell you, the silence in a 12,000 square foot mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows, a roaring fire, and no one to talk to, it echoes, especially when you can't walk. It was my second Christmas after the accident, and my first one truly alone. I was 25, the son of Cameron Ryland, tech billionaire, CEO of Ryland Dynamics, and a man who thought love was something you negotiated like a contract. He was spending Christmas in Zurich this year, finalizing some AI acquisition, said he'd make it up to me in January, which we both knew was a lie, and so there I was, in a wheelchair, in a massive, echoey house tucked into the hills of Colorado, alone except for Sophia, our housekeeper, who insisted on making dinner before heading home to her grandkids. "You sure you'll be okay, Mr. Ryland?" she'd asked as she zipped up her coat. "Yeah," I said. "Just gonna read, maybe fall asleep early." She smiled gently, the way people do when they're pretending not to feel sorry for you, then left. The roast sat untouched on the table, the wine uncorked. The candles flickered against the window, casting soft glows onto the snow outside. I didn't touch any of it. I just rolled into the great room, parked my chair by the fire, and stared at the flames. It wasn't always like this. Before the accident, before the T6 vertebrae in my spine decided I was done walking, I had a life, friends, a boyfriend even. But after the diagnosis, they faded like ghosts. Turns out in sickness and in health doesn't apply to guys you meet on dating apps. So yeah, I was used to the solitude. But something about that night felt heavier, like even the house was tired of pretending I was fine. Then came the knock. 3 slow, solid thumps against the oak front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one even knew how to get up here unless they were GPS wizards or lost hunters. I hesitated, then wheeled over, pushed the automatic door button beside the console. And that's when I saw them. 3 figures dusted with snow. The one in front was tall, leaned under a flannel coat, with snow in his beard and a cowboy hat in one gloved hand. Beside him, a teenager, maybe 13 or 14, was shivering in a beat-up jacket. And just behind them stood a man I can only describe as magnetic, broad shoulders, dark hair slicked from the snow, eyes that landed on me and didn't flick away, didn't pity, didn't flinch. The cowboy spoke first. "Sorry to bother you, sir. Our truck slid off the road a mile back. Roads up here ain't been cleared. We tried to hike down, but," he nodded at the kid, "didn't make it far. Saw the lights. Hop in. We could use a phone. Maybe wait out the worst of it." I blinked. It took me a second to process, but something in his voice was calm, honest. He wasn't selling anything, just tired, cold, and a little desperate. Yeah, come in," I said, backing up so the door could swing open. They stepped inside, snow trailing in with them. The teen looked up at me, wide-eyed. "Holy crap, this place is huge." The cowboy gave a low chuckle. "Don't be rude, Levi." "I'm not. It's just, it looks like something out of a movie." I smiled, because it did. My dad had gone full Bond villain with this house. Glass, steel, and minimalism as far as the eye could see. "Levi, huh?" I asked. "Yeah," the kid said, pulling off his damp gloves. "This is Jesse, my uncle, and that's Caleb." Caleb, the quiet one. He hadn't said a word yet, but his eyes stayed on me like he was trying to read a book without opening it. "You're all right with us hanging here for a bit?" Jesse asked. "We'll call a tow when the storm eases." I waved him off. "I've got extra rooms. There's hot food too if you're hungry." Jesse looked like he might cry. "You sure? We don't want to intrude." "You're not." The truth was, they could have been serial killers and I still would have let them in. That's how badly I didn't want to be alone. We got them out of their wet coats. Levi gravitated toward the fire like a moth, warming his hands. Jesse followed me to the kitchen, helping himself to a slice of roast, with something close to reverence. And Caleb? Caleb watched. Not in a creepy way. More like measured. Still. Like he was used to listening before speaking. Eventually, I nodded toward him. "You hungry?" He hesitated, then nodded once. Yeah, thank you. His voice was deeper than I expected. Slow, but not dull. Like everything he said had weight to it. As I plated him some food, I realized I didn't feel awkward in my chair for once. Usually when strangers showed up, there was this tension. Where do I look? Should I offer help? Do I talk about it? But Caleb didn't treat me like that. He just took the plate with a quiet thanks and sat across from me. Evan, I said, offering my name. Caleb. And that was it. No awkward glances, no forced small talk. Just two men, strangers, staring across a dinner table with snow falling outside like something out of a postcard. And maybe, just maybe, Christmas was about to mean something again. We ate in the quiet. Not awkward quiet. Not the kind that makes you reach for your phone just to fill the space. It was more like the kind that settles over people who don't feel the need to pretend. Jesse had taken over, carving what was left of the roast, grinning like it was the best meal he'd had in months. Levi sat by the fire with a plate on his lap, asking questions between bites. How many rooms does this place have? Do I get to sleep in one with a TV? Did I really have a whole elevator just for one floor? And Caleb, he sat at the end of the table, chewing slowly, his eyes drifting from the food to the snow outside to me. Always back to me. So, Jesse said, licking gravy off his thumb. You live here all by yourself? I nodded. Yeah. Technically, my dad owns it, but he's never around. He's in Switzerland this week. Hell of a place to be stuck alone, he said, shaking his head. You don't got anybody else? I hesitated. No. That word always felt heavy when I said it out loud. No siblings. No partner. My mom passed 2 years ago. My dad buried himself in work. And most of my so-called friends drifted after the accident, unsure how to act around someone who couldn't snowboard or bar crawl or climb rooftop patios anymore. Jesse glanced toward Caleb, then back to me. Well, hell, I'm glad we ended up here then. Storm like this could have frozen our asses off in that truck. I'm glad too, I said, and meant it. The house felt warmer, not from the fire, from something else. Levi had curled up under one of the throw blankets, passed out half watching Home Alone 2 on the big screen. Jesse was on the phone in the mudroom, finally getting through to roadside assistance, pacing in slow circles and whispering curse words. That left me and Caleb alone in the living room, the storm hammering the windows now like it had something to prove. He was sitting on the opposite end of the sectional, legs stretched out, beer in hand. The light from the fire caught on the stubble along his jaw, making him look like he belonged in one of those whiskey ads. Gritty, quiet, handsome in a way that sneaks up on you. You good? He asked. I looked at him. Yeah, just haven't had company in a while. Caleb gave a small nod. You seem like you don't mind the quiet, I chuckled. The quiet's fine. It's the empty that gets to you. He nodded again, not agreeing, just understanding. After a pause, he asked, You mind if I ask what happened? The question surprised me, not because he asked, but because of how he asked. No curiosity, no pity. Just direct, respectful. I tapped my chest. T6 spinal injury, skiing accident, 2 years ago. He didn't flinch or say, damn, or tell me he was sorry. He just sipped his beer and said, You still ski at all? Sit ski? I blinked. No. I haven't been on a slope since it happened. Caleb leaned forward, setting his beer on the table. You should. I snorted. You sound like my physical therapist. He gave a slow, crooked smile. Smart guy, then. That made me laugh. A real one, the kind I hadn't felt in months. I'll think about it, I said. He leaned back, resting an arm along the top of the couch. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. But it ain't over. Not by a long shot. I looked at him then, not just at his face, but at the man, the confidence, the calm, the kind of guy who didn't talk to fill silence. Who didn't give compliments unless they meant something? You always this intense? I asked. His smile widened a little. Only when I give a shit. That answer stuck with me. We didn't say much else after that. Just sat there, watching the fire crackle, listening to the wind. Jesse came back in and said the tow truck wouldn't make it until morning. "We're officially your snowed-in guests," he said, half laughing, half apologizing. I didn't mind. I offered them the guest rooms on the second floor. Twin beds, private bathrooms, all accessible by the elevator. Jesse tried to argue, said they could sleep on the couches, but I wasn't having it. Levi was already out cold, and I figured it was easier to let him stay wherever he landed. Jesse carried him upstairs. Caleb stood at the base of the elevator, waiting with his duffel in hand. "You sure it's not a hassle?" he asked me quietly. I met his eyes. "Honestly, you guys showing up was the best thing to happen to me this year." Caleb studied me a second longer, then gave the smallest nod. "Okay." But before he stepped inside, he did something that surprised me. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and squeezed my shoulder. Just a second, just enough. Then he disappeared upstairs, and I sat there in the glow of the fire, heart racing, for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold, wondering how the hell a cowboy's hand could feel more grounding than anything I'd felt in years. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the storm, or the creaking of the trees, or the occasional snap of the fire as it burned down to embers. It was because of Caleb. Because every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying that moment at the elevator. The weight of his hand on my shoulder. The way he didn't say much, but said everything without needing to. I knew better than to overthink things. A lot of guys, especially guys like him, were just naturally gentle, respectful. But there was something different about the way he looked at me. Like he wasn't seeing a chair, or a story, or a broken thing. He was just seeing me. By morning, the storm had mostly passed, though everything outside was buried under a thick, glittering layer of snow. I rolled into the kitchen around 8:30, still in flannel pants and a hoodie, and found Jesse already making eggs like he owned the place. He grinned when he saw me. "Hope you don't mind. Couldn't let your fancy kitchen go to waste." "Be my guest," I said, amused. "What, no cowboy coffee over an open fire?" Believe me, I considered it. Levi was at the island, feet swinging as he scarfed down toast and peanut butter. "This place is awesome," he said through a mouthful. "Best sleep I've had in years." I smiled and poured myself a coffee, glad someone enjoyed it. And then Caleb walked in, hair still damp from a shower, wearing clean jeans and a plain gray t-shirt that somehow looked tailored to him. He nodded at me, not smiling exactly, but something softer, sleepy, familiar. "Morning," he said. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound too eager. He went straight for the coffee, his hand brushing mine as I slid the pot toward him. It wasn't on purpose, but it didn't feel accidental either. Breakfast was loud with Jesse's jokes and Levi's stories. They filled the kitchen with the kind of energy I hadn't realized I missed. The kind that makes time blur. By the time the tow truck showed up around 11, I felt something weird twist in my chest. I didn't want them to go. When the driver radioed in that the truck could be towed down the mountain, but the roads were still icy and dangerous, Jesse sighed and looked at me. "Any chance you're open to hosting us one more night?" he asked. I didn't even hesitate. Of course. And just like that, Christmas Day turned into something I hadn't had in years. Company. Not forced. Not fake. Real. By afternoon, I found myself on the deck with Caleb, both of us watching the sun bounce off the snow-draped trees. We didn't talk much. I liked that about him. But then, out of nowhere, he asked, "You used to ski, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah. Started when I was 5, competed in college." He paused. "I remember watching a sit-ski demo back in Montana. Guy tore through the slalom like he had rockets strapped to him." I laughed. "Sounds about right. You ever think about doing it again?" That caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But it's complicated." He nodded, like he understood. "A lot of things are. Doesn't mean they're not worth doing." There it was again. That thing in his voice. Not advice, not sympathy, Just quiet truth. I studied him for a second. Why'd you ask? He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Because when you talk about skiing, your face changes. I blinked. What do you mean? He tilted his head. Like you're still chasing something you think you can't have. I swallowed hard, heart pounding louder than I wanted it to. And you? You chasing anything? Caleb looked at me for a long moment, then said, yeah, maybe I am, but he didn't explain. He didn't have to, because something passed between us then, unspoken, but very, very real. Later, while Jesse and Levi watched a holiday movie marathon, Caleb and I ended up in the den with a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses between us. The snow had turned to light flurries. The fire crackled. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. How come you're so good at silence? I asked, looking at him over the rim of my glass. Caleb smiled faintly. Because people say more when they're not talking. I scoffed. That's deep. He smirked. That's true. There was a pause. A beat. Then I said, you keep looking at me like you want to say something. I do, he admitted. Then say it. He set his glass down, shifted closer. His voice was low, but clear. I think you're a lot more than what people see. That stopped me. I think you're brave, and smart, and sharp as hell. And yeah, you've been dealt a hard hand, but you're still here, still pushing, still opening your door to strangers on Christmas Eve. He leaned in, just slightly. And that kind of heart, that's rare. I felt heat rise to my face, not just from the wine or the fire, from him. Caleb, I said, my voice shaky, what are you saying? He was close now, really close. I'm saying, he murmured, if you were mine, I wouldn't have left you alone this Christmas. And then he kissed me, soft, slow, deliberate, and I let him. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic or anything like that. It was simple. And I think that's why it wrecked me. Caleb's lips brushed mine like he was asking permission, not demanding anything. And the way his hand found my jaw, just enough contact to anchor me, made me feel more solid than I'd felt in 2 years. When he pulled back, his eyes stayed locked on mine, searching, not for approval but for honesty. You okay? He asked, voice soft but steady. I nodded, breath caught in my throat. Yeah, you didn't expect it. No, I said, but I'm not sorry it happened. His mouth twitched into the barest smile. Good. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, like we'd both stepped over a line we didn't quite realize we were walking. I leaned back, heart still pounding in my chest. You always do that? Caleb tilted his head. What? Kiss guys in mansions after snowstorms. He chuckled. Only the ones who wear flannel pajama pants like a damn model. That made me laugh harder than I should have. Well, now you're just flirting. Maybe, he said, shrugging. You gonna stop me? I looked at him, really looked at him. There was no act in his expression, no nerves, just a quiet certainty that made me feel something I didn't have a word for. You know, I said slowly, I haven't dated anyone since the accident. Most people either pity me or treat me like I'm fragile. He nodded. I don't see fragile. Yeah? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I see a guy who had his whole life change and still figured out how to keep going. You opened your door to 3 strangers on Christmas Eve. You kept a smile on your face when you had every right to be bitter. You laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. They were all bad. I deadpanned. He smirked. And you're still laughing. I shook my head, but I couldn't wipe the smile off my face. Why are you really here, Caleb? He blinked. What do you mean? I paused. searching his face. You strike me as someone who doesn't end up in the middle of a blizzard unless he wants to. He looked down for a second, thumb tracing the rim of his glass. Then he said, my brother, Jesse, he's been raising Levi since his ex bailed a few years back. Needed a break. I offered to take them up to the mountains. Jesse picked the spot. I was just along for the ride. And the truck? Old piece of junk, slid like it was made of butter. So you didn't plan this? Caleb looked up again, and something shifted in his expression. No, but I'm glad it happened. I swallowed. Me too. We didn't kiss again that night. There was no rush, no need to force it. Instead, we talked. About our lives, our families, our pasts. He told me he used to break horses in Montana. Said he preferred animals to people because animals didn't lie. That he moved around a lot. That he rarely stayed in one place for more than a few months. But maybe I'm getting tired of running, he admitted. And maybe I'm tired of standing still. I said. We just looked at each other, both of us trying to figure out what this was, what it could be. Eventually, we said goodnight. I wheeled back to my room. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, reliving every word. Every look, every second of that kiss. The next morning was quiet. The snow was beginning to melt. Jesse and Levi were packing up their things. The roads had been cleared, and the tow truck had delivered their fixed-up ride to the base of the drive. You sure you don't want to come down the mountain with us? Jesse asked, sipping his coffee. I know Levi wouldn't mind a few more days of mansion life. I glanced toward Caleb. He didn't look at me, not right away. Just stared out the window, hands in his pockets, like he was thinking. Weighing something. You guys go ahead, he said finally. I'll catch up later, Jesse blinked. Yeah? Yeah. Levi didn't seem to care. He was too busy trying to sneak another pancake into his backpack, but Jesse looked at Caleb a little longer than necessary. Then he smiled. All right, just don't let the CEO kid seduce you too hard. Caleb didn't flinch. Wouldn't dream of it. When they left, the house was quiet again, but this time, it didn't feel empty. Caleb turned to me, hands still in his pockets. You want company today? I nodded. Yeah, I really do. He walked over, leaned against the back of the couch. Can I ask you something? Sure. He tilted his head. What happens if I stay a little longer? I looked at him. You mean like hours? He shook his head slowly. I mean days. My throat went dry. You'd want to? His answer was simple. I already do. He stayed. Not just for the day, not just until the roads were totally clear. Caleb stayed for the rest of that week. We didn't really talk about it like it was a decision. He didn't ask, and I didn't offer a formal invitation. He just didn't leave. And I didn't want him to. It was strange how quickly things started to feel normal. He cooked breakfast the second morning. Didn't ask. Just found the pans, cracked the eggs, and hummed low to himself while he moved around the kitchen like he'd been doing it forever. I watched from the dining table, coffee in hand, completely mesmerized by how comfortable he looked in my space. When I asked him what he was making, he said, Cowboy scramble. Like I should already know what that was. I didn't, but I pretended I did. We ate at the kitchen island that day, shoulder to shoulder. And when he nudged his plate toward mine with the last bite of bacon and said, You want it? I realized something else. I liked how easily he took up space in my life. By the third night, we were watching an old Western on the living room TV, something he'd picked from the streaming service, laughing at how they got the horses all wrong. He didn't ask to share the couch. He just sat down beside me, close, but not too close. His leg brushed mine once, then again. Eventually, I stopped pretending to focus on the movie and turned to him. Can I ask you something? I said. He nodded. What is this? To you? I mean, are we just hanging out? His expression didn't change. No. Then what is it? He didn't look away when he said it. It's me showing up, I blinked. Showing up? Yeah, for you, if that's what you want. I stared at him. You don't even know me. His brow lifted slightly. That's not true. Really? I know you spent Christmas alone until we knocked on your door. I know your dad works too much, and you pretend not to care. I know you used to ski because your whole face lights up when you talk about it. I know you don't trust easily, but you still opened your home to 3 strangers without blinking. He paused. And I know you kiss like you mean it. That one hit me right in the chest. I didn't have a smart-ass reply for that, so I kissed him again. No hesitation this time. No wondering what he meant. Just lips against lips. Heat. Intention. Everything I'd wanted to feel again, everything I didn't think I'd get to feel again, was right there between us. His hand cupped the back of my neck as he deepened the kiss. Mine slid around his waist. We pulled apart a minute later, both a little breathless. I don't move fast, I told him. You don't have to. I've been hurt. I won't. That was it. That's all he said. And somehow I believed him. We didn't sleep together that night, not in that way, but he did end up in my bed. We lay there, fully clothed, under the comforter, our legs tangled together like we'd done it 100 times. My head rested against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my cheek. I didn't think anyone would ever want me like this, I whispered. Caleb's hand traced slow circles on my back. Then they're idiots, he said. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. Not because I wasn't overwhelmed, but because I finally felt safe enough not to need the release. I fell asleep in his arms. By the time New Year's rolled around, it wasn't even a question anymore. Caleb was staying. He called Jesse and told him he'd catch up later. Jesse just laughed on the phone and said, "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." Which, according to Caleb, didn't narrow much down. We found a rhythm. He chopped wood. I made playlists. He took over the grill. I taught him how to use the smart lights and the home theater controls. I found myself smiling for no reason, laughing at stupid jokes, remembering what it felt like to want someone, and to let them want you back. And Caleb never made me feel like I was less. Never hesitated to touch me, to kiss me, to tease me. One night, after we shared a bottle of wine in front of the fireplace, he leaned close and said, "You know, I've never done this before." What? Stayed. Like really stayed. I looked at him. So why now? He didn't answer right away, just traced his thumb along the back of my hand. Because it feels like the first place I don't want to leave. I kissed him again, because I didn't want him to leave either. The days that followed felt almost surreal. Caleb became part of the house, part of my life. Not in a way that overwhelmed, not in a way that forced me to change, but in a way that made me feel like I wasn't just existing anymore. Every gesture was thoughtful. Every glance had weight. One afternoon, I wheeled into the kitchen, still in my hoodie and pajama pants, and found him kneeling by the oven, roasting vegetables. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the room. He looked up, eyes lighting when he saw me. "You want to try?" he asked, holding out a spoon. I took it, tasting the caramelized edges of carrots and parsnips. "That's amazing. You cook like this every day?" He shook his head. "Used to. Ranch life teaches you how to eat well without complaining." Then, a grin. "And impress people you like." I nearly choked on the bite. "That's smooth," he shrugged, casual as always. But I could see the little curl of pride at the corner of his mouth, the kind that made him irresistible. Later, we ended up in the den. The fire was roaring. Outside, the snow had melted enough that the roads weren't deadly, but still enough to blanket the world in soft white. Caleb had a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, sitting close to me in the sectional. I rested my head against his chest again, listening to the slow, steady thrum of his heartbeat. "You know," he murmured, "I wasn't expecting to fall into this, whatever this is. It's different." I lifted my head slightly, looking at him. Different good or different bad? He smiled faintly. Different good, better than I imagined, and safe. For both of us. That word, safe, echoed in my mind. I'd spent 2 years feeling like my life was on hold, feeling like nothing could touch me without shattering me. But with him, it didn't feel like that. It felt like I could move forward, slowly, carefully, and he'd be there. I found myself leaning forward, pressing my lips against his again. This time, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a statement, a promise, a beginning. I don't want to go back to being alone, I whispered when we pulled apart, faces inches from each other. He cupped my face, thumbs brushing along my cheekbones. Then don't. You won't have to. The next few nights passed in a comfortable blur of shared meals, quiet conversations, and laughter. We started planning small adventures. Caleb insisted I try a sit-ski again. He was determined to help me get back on the slopes, not pushing, but steady, patient, the kind of support I didn't know I needed. One evening after dinner, we ended up on the deck, wrapped in blankets, staring at the stars. He put his arm around me, and I didn't hesitate to rest my head on his shoulder. Ever think about what comes next? I asked, letting the words tumble out. After all this, snow and Christmas, and you? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think about it all the time. I just never thought I'd find someone I'd want to stay for. I turned to him. And now? He looked me straight in the eyes. And now I do. The wind picked up, cold against our cheeks, but we didn't move. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the house. Not the fire. Not the fancy amenities my dad had spent millions on. Home was Caleb. That night, when we went inside, we didn't even bother with the formalities of separate beds. We shared the same blanket, our bodies close. His hand found mine, intertwined with it, and we lay there, talking about everything and nothing, until sleep finally claimed us. I didn't dream that night. I didn't need to, because for the first time since my accident, I felt alive, whole, wanted. And I knew that no matter what happened next, storm, snow, absence, or distance, I'd never forget the Christmas that Caleb decided to show up and stay. By New Year's Eve, the house had transformed. Not in its structure, still gleaming and massive, but in its atmosphere. The echoing halls no longer felt lonely. The rooms no longer whispered emptiness. It was full, alive, because Caleb had stayed. That morning, we rolled into the great room together, Levi already curled on the couch with a comic book. Jesse had left earlier, promising to return with supplies for the ranch, leaving us behind. The storm had passed, the roads cleared, but we hadn't left the house since the day after Christmas. We hadn't needed to. I looked at Caleb, stretched out comfortably in the armchair beside the fire. His boots kicked off, jeans rolled up slightly, flannel shirt half unbuttoned. There was a softness to him I hadn't noticed before, the way he laughed at Levi's antics, the gentleness with which he handled a spilled cup of cocoa, the subtle way he always made space for me. Thinking about heading out today? I asked, keeping my tone casual, though my chest tightened at the idea of losing him. He shook his head. Not yet. Feels wrong to leave. I smiled. Yeah, feels right to stay. He tilted his head toward me. You know, most guys would have, I don't know, made me leave by now. I laughed softly. Most guys don't come in the middle of a blizzard and stay because they want to. He smirked. Touché. For a while, we just sat there, listening to the crackle of the fire and the quiet hum of the mansion. Then, slowly, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. The gesture was so simple, so intimate, it made my heart jump. I like this, I admitted, voice low. I like us. Here. Like this. Caleb's gaze softened. He leaned closer, letting our knees touch. Me too. I don't do long-term anything. But you, I want this. I want you. Those words hit harder than I expected. I'd spent so long imagining rejection, pity, indifference. I hadn't imagined someone would just want me entirely. I reached out, hand trembling slightly, and took his. Fingers intertwined. The warmth of him sent a shiver through me. "Then don't leave," I whispered. "I won't," he said, and he didn't. That night, Caleb and I made the living room our own little sanctuary. The fire burned low. The snow fell softly outside, painting the world in quiet white. We shared stories, laughter, and secrets we'd never told anyone else. Every glance, every touch, every smile was loaded with unspoken understanding. Eventually, Levi fell asleep, sprawled across the couch with a comic book still in his hands. I looked at Caleb, and he looked back with that same steady, unflinching gaze. Without a word, he leaned down and kissed me, slowly, deliberately, like he was engraving the moment into memory. "I want this," he said against my lips. "All of it, here, now, with you." I swallowed, heart hammering. "Me too." That Christmas Eve turned into Christmas week, had started with loneliness and silence, but it ended with warmth, connection, and a kind of love I hadn't thought I'd feel again. The kind that didn't pity, didn't rush, didn't require pretense. Just us. When my dad returned a few days later, I didn't have the usual awkwardness. Caleb was here. We were together. And for the first time in years, I felt complete. My dad, oblivious as always, didn't notice the subtle hand-holding, the way Caleb helped me into the wheelchair, the quiet comfort of someone who actually saw me. Not my injury, not my name, not my family title. That night, as Caleb and I sat by the fire again, I realized something profound. Sometimes life hands you storms, accidents, and snowstorms you didn't ask for. And sometimes, in the middle of the cold, a cowboy shows up, asks to join you, and stays. And that changes everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone.